We have to move on to the second paragraph. Listen, please. Gandhi was only one. His voice was single, always gentle, always reasoning. It was the voice of conscience in our turbulent life. He was right. He knew he was right. We all knew he was right. The man who killed him knew he was right. However, long the follies of the violent continue, they but prove that Gandhi was right. Non-violence is the only common sense for human beings. We die so easily. Our bodies are soft and unprotected. The brain, the heart, the soul are perilously lodged. We cannot wait for peace to be made, for arguments to be settled, for the quarrelsomeness of selfish men to subside. Before the settlement comes, life is over. At all costs, Gandhi said, we must refuse to use violence, resist to the very end, he said, but without violence. What about this paragraph is? Can you guess what it is about? Let's see. Gandhi was only one. There is only one personality. There was only one personality which is equal to that of Gandhi's personality. He is the one and only man. What kind of a man he was? His voice was single, always gentle, always reasoning. His voice was single. He had his own personality. He had his own voice. He never tried to be he never tried to be dependent on others. He always tried to be independent, right? He was always gentle. He was always reasoning. He had reasonable thinking. It was the voice of conscience in our turbulent life. That is, our life was full of problems. That's why the author says, our turbulent life, turbulent, filled with problems. In this turbulent life, his voice, Gandhi's voice, was that of conscience. He was right. Gandhi was always right. He had never done anything wrong. He was right. He knew he was right. Gandhiji himself was aware of the fact that he was right. We all knew he was right. We, the common people, also knew he was right. The man who killed him knew he was right. The killer, the assassin who Nathuram Vinayak Godse also knew Gandhi was right. However long the follies of the violent continue, they but prove that Gandhi was right. However long the follies of the violent continue, however long it takes the time for the violence to be continued, they all but prove that Gandhi was right. Non-violence is the only common sense for human beings. Again, our author Pearl S. Buck is talking in a ridiculous manner. That is, non-violence is the only common sense for human beings. We die so easily, right? We have to make our weapon, which is that non-violence. Non-violence should be our weapon. We die so easily. We have a life which is very short. So we die very easily. Our bodies are soft and unprotected. Our body is a mere system of blood and flesh. It will soon be perished. Our bodies are soft and unprotected. The brain, the heart, the soul are perilously lodged. What do you mean by our brain, our heart, our soul? All are perilously, dangerously lodged. We cannot wait for peace to be made, for arguments to be settled, for the quarrelsomeness of selfish men to subside. We cannot wait for anything of these activities. That is, we should not wait for peace to be made. We cannot wait for the arguments to be settled. We cannot wait for the quarrelsomeness of selfish men to subside, to be decreased. Before that settlement comes, our life is over. Why does the author says that we have a very short of time? Because our life is very short. If we wait for all these problems to be settled, we will definitely reach our death very soon. We cannot solve all these problems. At all cost, Gandhi said, we must refuse to use violence. Whatever happens in the world, whatever problems we are facing, we should not make use of the violence of what? We should not make use of the weapon of violence. Resist it to the very end, he said, but without violence. We have to resist. We have to survive. We have to exist. But we should not use violence. Okay? To a world confusing violence with power, these words seem too simple to be true. Yet truth is always simple. Men find confusions and entanglements because they are afraid of simple truth. But truth is not changed. It's still simple. It's more fundamental than the atom itself. What's that? To a world confusing violence with power. We are living in a world which is totally confused with violence and power. There is violence because there is power. The powerful men make use of violence as their weapon. These words seem too simple to be true. These are the very simple truth. Yet truth is always simple. The thing is, truth is always simple, right? Men find confusions and entanglements because they are afraid of simple truth. Men are afraid of truth. Have you ever read the essay written by a famous essayist Bacon, Francis Bacon? What's the name of his essay title? Of Truth. Right? In that he makes a comparison of truth and lies. Like that, truth is very simple. But it is not changed. It is very simple. It is more fundamental than the atom itself. Consider the young Hindu who sits in prison today, so heavily guarded because he killed Gandhi. Is he to die or to live? If we are to take Gandhi literally, and I think he meant always to be taken literally, that man should not die by violence, even as punishment for a crime. Suppose fantastically that he should be released. Gandhi was often in prison, and perhaps he would not want his murderer confined. Suppose absurdly that the assassin went free. What would be his life? Could he escape what he has done? I think never. Whenever he went among his own people, none would receive him. He could not hide, or he would be watched for and dreaded. None would want to touch his hand, the hand that killed Gandhi. Women would fear him, and children would be taught to despise him. Where could he find home and friends? There would be no place for him upon earth. He would be outcast. He would be haunted by Gandhi's own spirit, the spirit of Gandhi in other men working for his freedom, and his safety would be his destruction or his regeneration. For this man has a conscience, or he would not have killed Gandhi. The utter goodness of Gandhi's spirit working upon the human conscience drives men to destroy themselves from despair or to be born again. What about this paragraph? Consider the young Hindu who sits in prison today. Who was the prisoner? Nathuram Vinayak Godse. He is the young Hindu who sits in prison today, so heavily guarded because he killed Gandhi. He is in prison and he is heavily guarded because there is always a tendency from the prisoner to escape, right? So he is heavily guarded because he is the killer of Gandhi. Is he to die or to live? You can decide. Need he be killed or let him free to be lived? If If we are to take Gandhi literally, and I think he meant always to be taken literally, that man should not die by violence, even as punishment for a crime. If we take the principles of Gandhi, man should not die by violence, even as punishment for a crime. Even if he is a criminal, he should not be died by violence. Who says, or the Pearl S. Buck says, okay? Suppose you think of fantastically that he should be released. Suppose one day a criminal, who's he, Nathuram Vinayak Godse, is released from prison. Gandhi was often in prison, and perhaps he would not want his murderer confined. Do you think Gandhi also support this idea of imprisonment of his killer? Never, he cannot agree with this because he would not want his murderer to be confined. Suppose absurdly means what foolishly, that the assassin went free, right? We have to imagine here the situation of Nathuram Vinayak Godse getting released from the prison, and now he walks freely. Okay, what would be his life? What kind of a life he can lead then? Think of, could he escape what he has done? If he is released from the prison, our writer asks us whether he could live a life of peace or happy. Is it possible? I think never. Who thinks the author thinks he can never live a life of happy, a life of peace. Whenever he went among his own people, one would receive him. He could not hide, or he would be watched for and dreaded. What does it mean? Whenever he went among his own people, none would receive him. Nobody will be there to receive him because he is the killer of our great personality, Gandhiji, the father of our nation. So, nobody will be there to receive him. No one would receive him, right? He could not hide, for he would be watched for and dreaded. Can he hide somewhere? No, he cannot hide because he is always under surveillance. You know, as we say, you are under surveillance, or there is CCTV observing you wherever you go, whatever you do, all is under surveillance. Like that, he is watched and dreaded means what? All the people is in fear of him, right? None would want to touch his hand. Nobody is ready. Nobody would be ready to touch